I have half an hour to try and record this before I have to go and teach a lesson, but I'm going to try and get through as much as I can. I watched a video yesterday of Benoit the Black Ben discussing why he feels he can't accept Christianity as a faith, why he can't follow Christianity as a faith, and he lists a number of reasons why he feels this way. One example is he talks about how the stories of the prophets are told in the Bible and how he feels many of these stories are ignored, never spoken about openly, because of how concerning some of these stories are. He talks about how more broadly, it's not just the God of Christianity that he's unable to vibe with, to put that very loosely, but it's the God of all the Abrahamic faiths. And that means Christianity, Judaism, and Islam as well. And so instead of making this about why I think Benoit is wrong, I want to make this about why I feel that Islam was the right choice for me. And I say choice because even though I was born a Muslim, I think many Muslims, and I think this is perhaps the case for other faiths too, I think as individuals, we sometimes go through certain experiences in our lives that make us question faith and make us question God. And for some of us, those events either draw us closer to Him, and for others, it makes us turn away. And I went through that experience mostly during my early and maybe even into a bit of my late 20s, or my mid-20s at least. And those experiences led me to the conclusion that not only does Islam make sense to me, but that I believe that there is no other way for me to live. And again, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for those who are watching this. So I want to make this about why I believe Islam was the right way for me. And in so doing, trying to address some of the points that Benoit brought up. The first question that I want to answer is it even necessary for human beings to need I'm putting it in inverted commas, divine guidance? Is it necessary for us, or does it even make sense for us to use a book from over 1,000 years ago to teach us how to live and to teach us what is right and wrong in this very modern world that we live in? Particularly when we consider the things that we see happening around us all the time, in our own communities, in our own homes, across Africa, around the world right now. Does it make sense for us to need something like that? Because we have intellect, we have the ability to learn, we have the ability to understand. We also have emotions. And our emotions will tell us if somebody treats us in a way that we don't like, I don't want to be treated that way. And maybe the rational the rational response to that should be, if I don't want to be treated that way, I shouldn't treat others this way or that way. We also have empathy and sympathy, the ability to see the suffering and the struggling of others and to say, that's not cool, man. We shouldn't be doing that. So because we have this agency and we have this capacity, we probably don't need it. We don't need a written guidance. We don't need a spiritual guidance. To respond to that, I think my answer would be to say, if we put the holy books aside and we just focus on the idea of written rules first, even the spiritual stuff, put that aside. Let's just think about the idea of written rules. Think about the code of conduct at a high school. Think about the manifesto of a political party. Think about the laws of a country or a constitution. I think these rules must be written down. It's necessary for them to be written down, because the one weakness that a written document doesn't suffer from is the sometimes instability with which we make decisions when dealing with emotional situations. Psychology speaks about this very often, how emotions are very good predictors of behavior. It talks about how anger as an emotion often leads to this very automatic and intuition-based decision-making, which in other words just means that we don't think things through. We make decisions based on how we feel, and not by investigating and actually looking at the evidence objectively. And we see this a lot. It's happening a lot today. We see it in on social media. We see it in political circles, race-based politics, xenophobia, Afrophobia. We don't think these things through. We don't really study the evidence. And so we just choose what we think is best, what we feel is the right thing to do. And unfortunately, more often than not, if it doesn't cause self-destruction, it definitely causes harm and destruction for those around us. And so if society needs these written rules to act as a reference point for us to go to remind us that despite whatever feelings we might have, the anger, the fear, the pride, the panic, if society needs those written rules to, if not to stop power and emotions from corrupting public life, then at the very least to minimize it, right? Then to me, it also makes sense that as individuals, we need a sense of divine principles. And you could argue, why does it need to be divine? And we can get into that in a different conversation. But we need a set of principles individually that prevents our fear, our ego, our weaknesses, our anger from corrupting private life. We need a set of principles and rules that can protect me from myself and protect others from my weaknesses, to keep me in check. And it's not just about the rules and the pursuit for justice when we get wronged. The need for that spiritual guidance is also just to help us navigate everyday life. Life is tough, man. For the vast majority of us, life is difficult. And even more so for some. When we look across Africa, we see all of the conflicts, we see all of the wars happening. When we look across the rest of the world, the rest of the planet, we see all these wars and these conflicts happening. And we see people exerting and using the power they have to exploit and to oppress people. Thousands of people. And so that spiritual guidance acts as a means to help us navigate through all this craziness. And that's for some of us, for others, perhaps it might be therapy, it might be something else. But for some, that's not enough. In the Qur'an, Allah often describes how the book itself, the Qur'an, is a guide for mankind. And it often tells us to think and to reflect. In other words, calling us to reason and not just simply act on the way that we feel, to consider the consequences of our actions, to understand the impact that our decisions and our actions can have on those around us. The other thing that I wanted to address was also this question that Penwell posed. How can a loving father put weapons, put guns in a house, and then watch as his children play in that home and end up hurting themselves or destroying themselves and destroying each other, and then say, you did this to yourselves, and that some of you by extension deserve to be punished for it? How do we reconcile? How do we make sense of that? What kind of God is that? What kind of father would do that, right? I think in the most literal sense, my response would be, God, Allah, didn't make the 9mm. He didn't make the AK-47. He didn't make the atomic bomb and the missile or the drone. These are things we did. The majority of us completely overlook just how powerful choice actually is. It's a gift that he gave to mankind that he didn't even give to the angels. There are stories in Islam where the angels question him about why he's creating man. Or, they're going to cause destruction on the earth. But it's that gift of choice, of choosing where you stand on things, on choosing between what is right and what is wrong, even in moments when it's difficult. It's that gift that makes us the best of creation. And the ability to have intellect and to think and to decide whether this is right or not, and to have that argument sometimes with ourselves. What do we do when all our lives we're living in a state of poverty? What do we do when we can't pay the bills? Do we choose to go and deal with that with alcohol or with drugs? Do we choose to deal with that by becoming gangsters and selling the alcohol and drugs to our own people, watching them destroy themselves? Do we become criminals? These are all choices. And I think two very extreme, contrasting examples of just how powerful choice is on the one end, it is the war and the insane destruction that we can cause because of our choices, because of how we choose to use the intellect that we've been given. But on the opposite end, there is also the example of how when we choose to believe something and when we choose to stand by that belief, nothing and no one can get in the way of that. Nothing and no one can take that away from us. One example that comes to mind is the story of Bilal. Bilal radiallahu anh was an African slave to this Arab idol worshipper at the very beginning, just as Islam slowly started spreading. It was being whispered in private circles.
When the sun is overthrown, when the stars fall, when the mountains vanish, when the camels, big with young, are abandoned, when the wild beasts are herded together, when the seas rise, when the souls are sorted, when the female infant who is buried alive asks for what crime she was killed, when the books are opened, when the sky is torn away, then every soul will know what it has done.
And when this message reaches Bilal, he decides that this is the faith he wants to follow. Because while he's chained physically and controlled physically, what's inside here and what's inside here, nobody can control that. And when his master finds out that he has chosen to follow this new faith and to believe in this one God, his master takes him out into the desert sun, starts beating him, whipping him, puts this huge boulder onto his chest to almost crush him, and tries to coerce him into rejecting this new God, this new one God, and to follow the idols that his master worships. And throughout this whole event, he keeps saying Ahad, Ahad, which means one in Arabic. In other words, I will still believe in one God no matter what you do to me. Take my life. I stand by what I believe in. So that is the opposite end of just how powerful choice is. And no matter what people do to you, if you choose to believe something, if you choose to stand by something that you believe in, nobody can take that from you. In the same way that somebody who chooses not to believe in the religion, that's their choice. Nothing I do or I say or anyone else does or says can change that for them. Whatever their experiences may be, it's up to them. It's their choice. And Allah speaks about this in the Qur'an many times. But then the follow-up question could still be, but where's the justice in that? How can a God allow people who have power and status to exert that or to use that to oppress, to exploit, to destroy on such a massive scale that we've seen throughout history, that we see happening right now? Where's the justice in that? And I think people grapple with that idea because they only see this life as all that there is. That after your life is either taken or your life ends in this world, that there is nothing beyond that. In Islam, though, Islam teaches me that this life is it's a moment in comparison to what comes afterwards. And so even if I go through struggle my entire life, if I live to the age of 80 and that entire life is just riddled with struggle, riddled with difficulty, that on the day of judgment, when I see what's waiting for me on the other side, and there's actually a narration about this. I don't know whether it's a strong or weak narration, but I think there's a narration that says on the day of judgment, when a person sees what's waiting for them in heaven, in Jannah, they'll actually say, send me back, man. Send me back and put me through worse. If this is what eternity is going to be like. Again, if people don't believe in the idea of a year after, then it makes sense for them to ask the questions that they do about whether God is truly just or not. But Islam teaches me that there's going to be a day of judgment. And not just a day of judgment where those who wronged me are going to have to face the consequences of their decisions that they might not have ever faced in this life. But even I'm going to have to face the consequences of my decisions and how I might have wronged others. Another verse in the Qur'an talks about how Allah says, and I'm paraphrasing, corruption is spreading in the land and even on the sea because of what people do with their own hands. But these people will have to face the day of judgment in Islam. And we believe that's going to be the case for everybody, whether they choose to believe or not. There is no, in Islam, there is no salvation for just believing in something and then heaven is meant for me. It's something we have to earn. And it doesn't mean that we have to be perfect. Islam doesn't ask us to be perfect. Islam and in the Qur'an and in the Hadith, we are asked to do the very best that we can to sincerely make an effort to move closer to Him. There are hadith and narrations that speak about how when we take one step towards Allah, He takes several steps towards us. If we start walking towards Him, He runs towards us. So what about those who maybe do wrong and make mistakes and never really had an opportunity to get to know God, to get to know Allah? What about them? Do they deserve to be punished? The child who's born on the streets to an addict and who becomes a criminal to survive and becomes an addict themselves, what's their consequence? What's their end in the year after? Do they must they be punished? And if this is something that we worry about, it's a reflection that we really don't understand how just, how merciful Allah actually is. There's a narration that talks about how one day the Prophet is standing with some of the companions and he sees this woman nursing her little infant, a baby. And he says to the companions, that woman over there, can you imagine her throwing her baby into the fire? Do you think that she would do that? And they say no. And he says to them, Allah is more merciful to His servants than even that mother is to her own child. There's a narration that says that Allah created 100 parts of mercy for Himself. But only one of that 100 has He given to this physical world, to this dunya. That's what we call this world. The other 99 parts of His mercy He has saved for the day of judgment. Some might hear that and say to themselves, yo, with those kind of odds, with those kinds of numbers, I can do what I want in this life. And before I die, I can just say, yo, I'm really sorry for this. I shouldn't have done this. But a true God is one who not only knows what we reveal, what we say and what we physically do, and what we physically show the world, but He's also a God who knows what we hide, what we conceal, what our intentions really are behind the things that we do. Because you can have somebody who is, who does all the most amazing work in public. The politician, the imam, the pastor, whatever it might be, doing all the great work in public. But his heart and his intentions are rotten. He does what he does for the sake of status, for the sake of power, for the sake of glory and wealth. And so there is no fooling the true God. Many times in the Qur'an, Allah says that these people are only fooling themselves. I'm going to pause there because I don't have much time left. But I'm going to come back and do a part 2 because there's a few other points that I want to talk about as well. But these are just some of the reasons why Islam not only makes sense to me, but why I believe, for me, there is no other way. So let me come back in a couple of hours and I'll do part 2. I look forward to your thoughts, to your comments. Let me know whether you are Muslim or Christian or whatever faith you follow, why you follow that faith, why you believe that that's the right choice for you. And if you've turned away from it, let me know why. Look forward to it. Catch you in the next one or catch you in part 2.